There comes a quiet moment in life when something inside you begins to change and almost nobody notices. It doesn't arrive with noise or drama. It doesn't come with a big announcement. It happens slowly, in silence, somewhere between the messages that were never answered and the conversations that always seemed to fade away. One day you realize something that had been there all along, but you never wanted to see it clearly. You begin to notice that for a long time, you were the one holding certain relationships together. For years, you may have believed that effort was proof of care, that sending one more message, trying one more time, showing up again even after silence, meant that you were someone who valued people. And in many ways that is true. People who care deeply, who try to keep connections alive, who don't give up easily, are rare. But there is a thin line between valuing someone and slowly losing yourself trying to keep them in your life. Maybe you have experienced this before, that quiet feeling that something is slightly off, the sense that you are always the one starting conversations, always the one checking in, always the one asking how the other person is doing. At first it feels normal. When we care about people, making effort feels natural. But over time, a small question begins to appear in the back of your mind. Would they do the same for me? And the moment that question enters your thoughts, everything begins to change. Because suddenly you start noticing things you used to ignore. The delayed replies, the conversations that end when you stop talking, the plans that never happen unless you bring them up again. Slowly you begin to realize something uncomfortable. The connection you believed was shared may have been carried by you alone. And when that awareness begins to grow, something inside you quietly starts shifting. At first, you try to ignore the feeling. No one likes the idea that they might be alone inside a relationship, so your mind searches for explanations. Maybe they are busy. Maybe they are going through something difficult. Maybe you are overthinking. And so you keep doing what you have always done, trying a little more. You send another message. You start another conversation. You ask how their day went. You make another effort to keep the connection alive, because deep down, you believe that relationships require effort. And that belief is not wrong. Every meaningful relationship requires care, attention, and presence. But the problem begins when the effort stops being shared. There is a type of exhaustion that doesn't come from work or responsibilities. It comes from emotional imbalance. It appears when you feel like you are constantly trying to maintain something that seems to slip away the moment you stop holding it together. The more you try, the more you start to notice a pattern. Some people appear only when they need something. Some disappear the moment you stop reaching out. Some enjoy your presence, but not enough to make real effort to keep you around. At first, this realization feels uncomfortable because many of us grow up believing that if we are kind enough, patient enough, supportive enough, people will stay. But life quietly teaches a different lesson. Some people leave, not because you were not enough, but because they were never planning to walk the same distance with you. And when that truth begins to settle inside your mind, another thought slowly begins to form. Maybe the problem was never that people walked away. Maybe the real problem was that you kept chasing them long after they had already stopped walking beside you. There is an important difference between fighting for someone and begging for someone's presence. For a long time, many people confuse these two things. They believe that insisting is a form of love, that continuing to try, even when the other person shows little effort, is a sign of loyalty. But there comes a point where trying stops being love and starts becoming exhaustion. Maybe you remember moments when you first began to notice this. A conversation you tried to keep alive by yourself. A friendship that only existed when you were the one sending the first message. A relationship where you made plans, showed interest, tried to build something, while the other person simply responded to what you did. At first, you convince yourself that it is just a phase. Everyone gets busy sometimes. People go through periods of distance. But when days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months, it becomes harder to ignore what is happening. It stops feeling like a phase. It starts feeling like a pattern. And patterns reveal something important about how people truly feel. One of the hardest things to accept in life is that not everyone values your presence the same way you value theirs. Some people like you, but not enough to make effort. Some enjoy talking to you, but only when it is convenient for them. And some simply become comfortable knowing that you will always be there, no matter how little they contribute to the relationship. Without realizing it, when you chase people constantly, you create a certain comfort for them. They know they don't need to try too hard. They know that even if they disappear for days or weeks, you will probably reach out again. And slowly, without intending to, you teach people that your presence will always be available, even when theirs is not. Not because you have no value, but because you have been giving it away too easily. And one day, after repeating this cycle many times, something inside you begins to feel tired. Not physically tired, but deeply, emotionally tired. That exhaustion doesn't arrive all at once. It grows quietly, almost unnoticed. At first, it is just a small frustration when someone takes days to reply. Then it becomes a strange feeling when you realize you are always the one keeping conversations alive. And little by little, what once felt normal begins to feel heavy. You start noticing details that once escaped your attention. People who say they miss you, but never make an effort to see you. Conversations that seem meaningful, but disappear the moment you stop carrying them forward. Relationships that only exist as long as you continue feeding them with your time, your energy, and your attention. And eventually, a quiet question appears in your mind. What would happen if I stopped trying? It's a frightening question at first, because deep down, there is a fear hiding behind it. The fear that if you stop chasing people, some of them might simply disappear. For a long time, avoiding that answer feels easier than discovering the truth. It feels safer to keep trying than to face the possibility that some relationships were never as strong as you believed. But there comes a moment when the emotional exhaustion becomes stronger than the fear. You begin to notice that you are investing too much energy in people who invest very little in you. And once that awareness settles in your mind, it becomes impossible to ignore. So slowly, almost without realizing it, your behavior begins to change. You send fewer messages. You stop forcing conversations that feel one-sided. You stop filling every silence. And for the first time in a long while, you simply observe. You observe who reaches out. You observe who disappears. You observe who truly values your presence. And it is in that quiet moment of observation that many hidden truths finally begin to reveal themselves. When you finally stop chasing people, something unexpected begins to happen. At first, the silence feels strange. Your phone becomes quieter. Conversations that once happened every day slowly fade away. Notifications that used to appear constantly are suddenly gone. And for a moment, this can make you question your decision. You may wonder if you did something wrong. You may feel the urge to reach out again, just to bring things back to the way they were. Because when we are used to maintaining every connection ourselves, stopping creates a temporary emptiness. But that emptiness has a purpose. It reveals what your constant effort used to hide. Some people simply don't come back. Not because something dramatic happened, not because there was a conflict, but because without you pulling the relationship forward, they never intended to move it themselves. And that realization can hurt. You begin to understand that some relationships only existed because you kept them alive. Like a fire that needed wood every single day, and you were the only one bringing it. But something else begins to happen at the same time. A few people still appear. They check on you. They start conversations. They ask how you are doing without needing a reminder. They make space for you in their lives without you having to chase them. And suddenly, something becomes very clear. The people who truly value you don't need to be pursued. They show up. They make effort. They create space for you in their lives. And slowly you begin to realize a simple but powerful truth. Chasing people never kept the real relationships alive. Most of the time, it only hid which relationships were real. After this shift begins to happen, the way you see relationships starts to change. Before, you believed you had to constantly put in effort to keep people around. You thought that if you stopped trying, everything would fall apart. But now you begin to notice something different. The most genuine relationships don't feel forced. They don't depend on one person carrying all the weight. When two people truly value each other, there is a natural balance. Sometimes one person reaches out first, sometimes the other. Sometimes one talks more, sometimes the other listens. But the effort exists on both sides. And when that balance exists, something inside you relaxes. You no longer feel the constant pressure of keeping everything alive. Conversations begin to flow more naturally. Silence between messages stops feeling like rejection, because now there is a quiet understanding that both people value the connection. But reaching this point often requires letting some people fade away. Not because you became cold, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started respecting something that many people ignore for too long: your own energy. Your time, your attention, and your emotional presence are valuable things. And when you give all of that to people who offer very little in return, something inside you slowly becomes exhausted. That is why stopping the chase is not an act of pride. It is an act of self-respect. It is understanding that real relationships are not built through pursuit. They are built through mutual choice, two people who continue choosing, again and again, to remain present in each other's lives. And when you finally understand this, life begins to feel lighter. When you stop chasing people, another quiet transformation begins to happen inside you. For the first time in a long while, your attention slowly starts to return to yourself. Before, a large part of your energy was focused outward. You were thinking about who hadn't replied yet, wondering if you should send another message, trying to understand someone's silence, interpreting small signals, small changes in tone, small shifts in behavior. Without realizing it, you were spending an enormous amount of emotional energy trying to maintain connections that required constant effort. But when you stop chasing, that energy begins to come back to you. And in that space, something powerful begins to grow: clarity. You begin to see things from a different perspective. You realize that many times you weren't just chasing people, you were also trying to prove something, trying to prove that you were important, trying to prove that you were worth someone's attention, trying to prove that if you were patient enough, kind enough, present enough, people would choose you. But when you stop running after people, you begin to understand something deeper. Your value was never determined by how many people respond to your messages. Your worth was never measured by how many people decide to stay. Your value has always existed, independent of anyone else recognizing it. And when that realization settles inside you, the way you move through life begins to change. You become more careful with your time, more selective with your energy, more attentive to the people who genuinely make an effort to be part of your life. Because now you understand a simple truth: the people who truly want to be in your life find a way to be there. Over time, you start to realize that stopping the chase is not only about relationships. It is about growth. It is about understanding that some people enter your life for a reason, some for a season, and only a few for the journey. Before this realization, you may have tried to hold on to everyone. You believed that every friendship had to be preserved, every connection had to be saved, every relationship had to be maintained at all costs. But life slowly teaches a different lesson. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay forever. Some people appear when you need to learn something. Others appear because they need something from you. And a few rare ones appear because they truly want to build something meaningful with you. For a long time, you may have tried to keep all of them close. You invested time, energy, patience, and care into relationships that quietly faded the moment you stopped sustaining them. But as you grow, you begin to understand something important. Life moves in chapters. Some people belong to a chapter, others belong to the entire story. And when you accept this, something inside you becomes calmer. You stop trying to control who stays and who leaves. You stop interpreting every silence as rejection. You stop spending energy trying to convince someone that your presence matters. Because the people who truly value you don't need to be convinced. They already know. They show it through their actions. They stay. And the more you surround yourself with people like that, the more you realize how simple relationships can be when both people genuinely want to be there. Sometimes, the only way to discover who truly belongs in your life is to stop chasing everyone else. At some point in this journey, you begin to notice something interesting. When you stop chasing people, it doesn't push away the ones who truly matter. In many cases, it actually reveals them. Because when you stop trying to please everyone, stop overextending yourself, and start living more honestly with your own boundaries, the relationships that remain become much more real. They are no longer sustained by effort alone. They exist because both people choose to stay. The people who remain in your life do so because they want to be there, not because you kept sending messages, not because you insisted on keeping the conversation alive, but because your presence has real value to them. And that changes the way you feel inside those relationships. You no longer feel the need to prove your importance. You no longer feel the pressure to constantly earn attention. You no longer live with that quiet anxiety of waiting for a reply that might never come. Instead, something much calmer begins to appear. Peace. Peace in knowing that people who truly value you don't disappear without reason. Peace in understanding that genuine relationships are never one-sided. Peace in accepting that some people were simply not meant to stay in your life. And perhaps that is one of the most important lessons that maturity teaches us. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to remain, and that's okay, Because when you stop chasing the people who don't want to walk beside you, you create space for the ones who truly do. And in the end, this may be one of the quietest yet most powerful transformations a person can experience. The day you stop chasing people is not the day you stop caring. It is not the day you become distant or cold. In fact, it is the day you begin to understand something much deeper about yourself. It is the day you start recognizing your own worth. Because once you stop running after people, something becomes very clear. The people who truly want to be in your life never needed to be chased in the first place. They show up, they reply, they make time, they make an effort. And when you begin to accept this truth, something inside you shifts. You stop living your life trying to hold on to people who are not trying to stay. You stop pouring your energy into relationships that survive only because you keep feeding them. Instead, you begin to invest your time and attention in the people who genuinely value your presence. And slowly, life begins to feel lighter. Your relationships become more honest. Your conversations become more natural. And silence stops feeling threatening. Because now you understand that the people who truly care about you will never disappear without reason. So if you've reached a point in your life where you're starting to realize these things, it may be a sign that you're growing, a sign that you are learning to value not only the people around you, but also yourself. And sometimes the greatest sign of maturity is not chasing the people who walk away. It is having the calmness to let go of those who never intended to stay. If this video made you reflect on something you've experienced, leave a like. It helps the channel continue sharing stories like this. And if you enjoy content about human behavior, quiet reflection, personal growth, and the small realizations that change how we see life, consider subscribing to the channel. Also, take a moment to watch the next video appearing on your screen. It explores another powerful perspective about relationships and self-awareness that you might find meaningful. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next video.